Welcome back to another episode. I am thrilled to introduce our guest today, Panquetzani, a holistic womb counselor, complete wellness coach, traditional birth attendant, and the visionary behind Indigemama, Ancestral healing. Drawing upon over 4,000 years of indigenous traditions passed down through her matriarchal lineage, Panquetzani seamlessly weaves together her deep knowledge and personal experiences to guide individuals on a transformative journey of self-discovery and well-being. Her belief in the innate wisdom within each person fuels her passion to revolutionize individual and collective health. In our conversation, we explore the profound impact of traditional Mexican healing stories on Panquetzani's work, how colonialism tragically disrupted and eroded ancestral healing practices and wisdom across cultures, the current resurgence of traditional medicine, and the stark differences between mainstream health and Panquetzani's unique approach, which is grounded in ancestral wisdom and guided by a holistic perspective. Throughout our conversation, Panquetzani offers invaluable advice and guidance, providing a roadmap for those seeking to connect their roots and embrace the transformative power of ancestral wisdom. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Panquetzani. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. I am so happy to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Thank you for having me here. It's such an honor.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled. I feel like there's so much I want to ask you. I think the first thing is I would just love to know more about your background. Can you describe your journey to becoming a healer and what inspired you to pursue this path?
I was born into it. I was born into a matriarchal lineage of healers. And at my home growing up, it was just a total matriarch. And so I thought this was normal. I thought everybody's grandmother cooked from scratch. I thought everyone's grandmother healed using herbs and medicine. I thought everybody had a garden at home. I thought everybody worked in the garden. And it wasn't until I was about 14, 15 that my friend gave me a book. And in that book, there were these narratives from curanderas, and it was curanderas from New Mexico and from Arizona and from like within the US. And that's when I realized I was like, oh my gosh, I have something special at home. I think my grandma is a curandera. And if you don't know, a curandera is a traditional healer, someone who uses plants and rituals and foods to heal a person.
Right. I did not know. So I'm really glad you said that because I was going to ask. Was there any
Yeah,
more to it? Or like, so growing up, that was basically what your experience was, and then suddenly you realized that that was not the case for all the rest of us.
yeah. And then I had a huge awakening when I got pregnant in 2008 with my first son. And I realized that this whole world of pregnancy and birth and postpartum and fertility and like women's wellness and womb wellness, sexual health, like that at that time there was little to no information on how to get through this naturally. And my guiding light in that situation were my grandmothers. And so I relied on their wisdom. And even the things that I thought that were, just kind of like old wives' tales, um, my own internalized racism made me feel like the truths that my grandmother were telling me were just old wives' tales, that they had no use. It's just what the old people think,
Right.
right?
I don't love that
And
term, old wives' tales. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's so it's almost demeaning in a way, right? It's like it's discrediting thousands of years of like of holistic practices and cultural practices, no?
yeah. And I think it was strategically used that way, and
Yeah.
there were whole campaigns to really make our medicine bad, to make it illegal from practicing, to shame it and to guilt us into hiding or to not practice at all. And this is how, especially for indigenous peoples, this is how we've lost a lot of our traditions, is through this shame and guilt and this language used against us.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that because obviously you speak a lot about colonialism and its impact on ancestral wisdom and practices, like you were just saying. Can we talk about that some more? Just about how it's impacted these cultures, particularly the healing practices? Obviously, not just in the Americas, right? It's really around the world. But I know obviously your
Yeah.
experience is here.
hmm Yeah, it's really hard because I come from a lineage where in Mexico and Tlaxcala on my dad's side, we still have a lot of our culture intact. The family, we still have a temazcali, which is a sweat bath or a sweat lodge, sweat house, or like an ancient sauna. We still have that. We still use that. My father tells me stories, my grandmother tells me stories about what that was like, being in the sweat lodge and then there was a river right outside of it and then hopping into the cool river. Um, yeah. And so it's really difficult because a lot of us are we're displaced from our indigenous lands because of colonialism, because of capitalism, NAFTA and just the economic pressures that we face in Mexico and Central America caused by colonialism, caused by land theft, caused by resource theft for 500 years. We come here to this side, which wasn't a border we used to freely. Um, 300 years ago, it only became a border in 1848.
Yeah.
So we used to cross freely, and now we're criminalized for crossing. And then this adds an element of shame for a lot of us, where we don't want to practice our traditional healing, traditional rituals. Like there's no space for it in American society. So we have to choose, as folks who are coming through, we have to choose, do we want to hold on to who we are, or do we want to be comfortable? Do we want to assimilate? And I don't bash anyone for assimilating because living under institutional racism is hard on your body, it's hard on your womb, it's hard on your psyche. And so, whatever folks choose, that's up to them. And a lot of healing was lost in that process. My grandmother, she's a very strong person. She is so, man, she is just a powerhouse. She's a force of nature. And so she swiftly kept these practices. It wasn't an option for her. It was just like, this is just the way I am. She learned English really fast and she still continued cooking from scratch. I had a cousin the other last month who visited and she tasted my grandma's food. She's like, oh, en esta casa siguen siendo mexicanos. In this house, you guys are still Mexican.
Yeah, that's incredible though, to have that wherewithal and that and sort of that tenacity to first of all come to another country not speaking the same language. I've lived in other countries where I don't speak, they don't speak English, and it is so freaking hard. I mean, so just that alone on your psyche. I remember just being scared to leave the house, to be completely honest. And because I
Yeah.
just would get so nervous, obviously I just said I could barely pronounce your name. It's so embarrassing. So I really can relate to that. But then to, be completely immersed in an entirely different culture. Of course you want to fit in. I mean, I came to the US
Yeah.
over 20 years ago and I come from an English speaking country in the Caribbean,
hmm
but still very
hmm
different culture. And the first thing I wanted to do was not have a West Indian accent anymore because
Mm.
people it drew attention and I don't look, like I come from where I come from. So there's that whole piece too. So you just want to fit in. Like I feel as though that
hmm
would be the inclination. So your
hmm
grandmother clearly is a badass.
Yeah, she's amazing. And I'm so lucky because so she came here and my mother was born here and my mom's generation was like, oh, that's old wives' tales. That's old wives' tales.
Right.
But she still listened to all of the things my grandmother said. Like, yeah, it's old wives' tales, but I'll do it. like the whole the
Like
whole
what? Can you
ritual.
share? Can you share some of the
Yeah.
things that she does? I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
any traditional Mexican healing stories would be so welcome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The way my mom describes her postpartum rituals, we have a thing called la cuarentena. It's the 40-day quarantine where you lay in, you get served, and basically your body, your womb, your baby just they pay homage. They serve, they wait on you hand and foot. And so my mom, uh, she was like, yeah, I remember my cuarentena. She's like, yeah, like my parents did everything for me. My dad made me batidos every day. Batidos are like warm smoothies made of grains, made of cooked, soaked grains and herbs. It's really delicious.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
like, my grandpa made me, my dad made me batidos. My mom made me tea. They made me wear my faja every day. Faja's a womb wrap to keep everything, to keep the womb warm, to keep everything intact, and to help everything heal faster, easier, with less stress and strain on your body.
Mm,
And she was
sounds
like, I did everything she said. And I was like, oh, this doesn't work. But then, I tasted it and I ate it and I was like, oh, this works. And she was like, so I just listened to whatever they said. And then on my 40th day, she told me I had to take you to church and present you to God. So the first place I left the house was church.
that's
And my
awesome.
mom's not religious. She like does not like going to church. It's almost like she was complaining and she thought it was ridiculous. But we have these traditions intact because they help us survive. Not only do they help us survive, they're not only are they preventative care, but they're rituals for paying homage, honoring this rite of passage. So many of us, you know, women and folks with uteruses and hormonal cycles, we go through so many rites of passage in our lifetimes, and they are invisible most of the time to society. They're invisible. We just go from no period to having a period, not pregnant to pregnant, to having a period to that's it, never having any more periods. And so there's so much silence around this. It's almost like we're invisibilized and we are, I don't know if that's a word, but I'm making it up now.
I like it. I love it. Perfectly encapsulates what you're trying to say.
And we're expected to be the same, do the same, produce the same, even though we're having massive life and cycle changes.
Mm.
So, Mexican traditional medicine really holds space, and it creates a start and a finish to these times in your life.
It's so perfectly said. And it actually makes me think of uh, a friend of mine. She had told me many years ago that she was in Mexico on vacation and had was in a taxi, I think, going to the airport, and she understood Spanish sort of. And the her taxi driver received a phone call from his wife while she was in the car with him, and she was telling him all about the fact that their first daughter had gotten her first period, and he was ecstatic on the call. And so she was kind of piecing it together and then asked him, and he said, my daughter just got her first period. And he was so thrilled and so smiley and happy. It's making me smile thinking about it. It's so cute. And they were going home. He was going home to put together a whole celebration for her after he dropped my friend to the airport. I
Wow.
was just like, are you kidding? It's just so incredible. And so it just what you're saying makes me think about that, and so many other traditional cultures around the world where there is celebration and ritual for all of these massive milestones in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
there something, is there what do you all typically do what with a first period or puberty or any of this kind of, those
Yeah.
that time of life?
Well, it depends on how far you want to go back.
Ah,
Um,
let's
yeah,
go all the way back,
there,
girl. Let's go
yeah.
back.
There were ceremonies for we call it like the young corn ceremonies. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of observing corn grow.
I
but it
mean, I
is.
live in Connecticut in the countryside, so I see a lot of corn, but I don't know if it's the same kind of corn as what you're talking about. It's not great corn. But it is, but I do, now I see a lot of it. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. From start to finish, it's just a beautiful process. It's like the young leaves, you don't know what it is, you can't really recognize it, and then it
True.
becomes a stalk. And then from the stalk are leaves, and then you see emerging from the leaves, you'll see like it looks like a soft little flower. And you're like, is this baby corn? Is this a weird leaf? Is this a flower? Like, what is this? It just looks so delicate, so soft, so moist. And this is what we consider when you are in that in between before you're like ripening, you're becoming a full human. In Mesoamerican culture, we are made of corn. Our sustenance is corn and our flesh is corn. And in one of our creation stories, one of the gods, he actually gets corn and he grinds it up and he forms us using using corn and his blood. And this is what we're made of. And so when we see this chinashtli growing out, we're like, okay, this is where um, girls are when they're at the point of puberty. And so we have ceremonies for them. We have rituals where we're like, okay, you are no longer a little girl, you're now a woman. And with the children as they're growing up, they're treated as adults. So even though they're young and immature and still learning, 14, 15 years old, what do you know at that age?
We think we know everything at
I
that age. Oh man, I know.
know.
Isn't it crazy?
It's wild. It's
Yes.
so wild. But that's just like a sign of emotional maturity when you think you know it all. And then like 10 years later, you're like, wow, I knew nothing, but I really was convinced.
Right? So convinced and so wrong and strong, as we say in the Caribbean. It was bad. Yeah, I
Mm.
know, right? And then I think in my 20s, I knew so much. And then in my 30s, I knew so much. And here I am, 43. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm just figuring it out now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
The wisdom to know that you're just figuring it out.
seriously.
And
Is
so
there
we have
anything? Oh, go
ceremonies.
ahead.
So we have ceremonies for them where they're acknowledged by everybody in the community. They're given offerings. Everybody does it a little different. But what happened is during colonization, Spaniards took this and they used syncretism. They they studied our rituals in depth. Um, if you read Bernardo de Sahagún, he has like a lot of our rituals written out because he wanted to better colonize us. He wanted to study our rituals to see like, okay, which one of our rituals can we replace this with? Because he saw that if they told us to stop doing our rituals, we wouldn't stop. But if we switched it out, we're more likely to convert. We're more likely to follow Spanish rule. And so that turned into the modern day quinceañera when when the girl turns 15. And now instead of having a big party outdoors being acknowledged by the community, she's taken to church. She's
Wow.
taken to church and then there's a party afterwards.
So fascinating. I mean, I can imagine if we dig into the backstory of all of these modern day traditions
Mm-hmm.
or modern day practices. It's so layered, it's so multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about that actually, just sort of like with the healing, I guess, the industry that I'm in right now, like how, because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like wellness, mainstream health and wellness or holistic wellness, whatever, that say someone like me would provide. I feel like there are so many obviously similar threads, but I'd love for you to talk about how your approach to healing differs from what something like I would be doing. I mean, I
Mm,
think that a lot of what I do obviously is rooted in traditional practices, and
hmm
we could talk all about crediting those practices too, because I know that that's a huge problem
hmm
in the holistic wellness space.
hmm
But I would love to talk about that, like how your approach is different to, like, say, what I do.
Yeah. So this is the fun part about what I do. It's the worldview, the philosophy, and the indigenous scientific approach to women's wellness and to sexual health. In Mesoamerica, we have our own worldview of the body.
Mm.
And a lot of folks will say Western science is superior because we have scientific studies. But what have we as Indigenous people been doing for 4,300 years of Indigenous science? We've been doing scientific research, we've been observing the body, we've been noting not only what it looks like in one cycle, but lifetimes of cycles, generations of cycles. And one of the biggest things that stands out about Mesoamerican medicine is that we believe in the opening and closing of bones and the falling or the misplacement of organs. And that gets really fun. It gets really fun because it's almost like there's no way to compare that to Western science. Um, yeah, but if you look at it and break it down, you see how it actually does overlap, like with hormones and um, women's wellness and period pain and even PMS, even infertility. I've been able to help folks through infertility using only indigenous medicine, indigenous science, after they have worked with fertility doctors for decades, after they've seen healers, doctors. I had a family, a woman and her husband who were trying to get pregnant for over 10 years.
Mm.
And they had tried three IVF cycles, failed. They had one embryo left, and their intention was to come to me to prepare her womb for the embryo. She had tried the holistic route, natural route. She flew out to Hawaii to see a healer. She saw doctors. She was just at her end. She's like, well, I might as well try this. And she's like, yes, get my womb ready. The next cycle, she called me. She said, I have to cancel my appointment because I'm pregnant.
Whoa. Whoa. Tell us
Yeah.
everything. What'd you do?
And that's only with herbs and body work. So when we go back and we talk about the prolapse of organs or the drop of or the I guess dropping of organs,
You
we
talked about
believe,
this. Didn't you talk about this on Instagram the other day? Like chronic stress dropping your womb. I'd never
yes,
heard it worded like that before. Anyway, keep going.
yes. So we believe that the womb could drop. We believe that underneath the navel, so your womb should be 1 to 2 fingers underneath your navel and 2 to 3 fingers above your pubic bone.
Okay.
And we believe that this is the optimal place for your uterus to be in order for your whole body to function well. And if it's tilted, if it's tilted to the side, tilted to the back, if it's too low, then you start to get all of these issues because it causes what we call frialdad, coldness in the womb. The way I try to liken frialdad so that my modern day students will understand is that if you have a dropped womb, that creates tension, that creates stagnance. If you have stagnance, you have lack of blood flow. What is blood flow? Blood flow is warm. When you have lack of blood flow, that's coldness, right? It's cold. And
Yeah.
so what happens when you don't have blood flow? That means your hormones are not circulating. That means your biofeedback is not happening because these messages are delivered via your blood, right? So everything's slow. So of course, these issues stack up over time, and it all starts with the position of your uterus.
Mm.
And so this is what we focus on. We focus on if the uterus is warm, if the uterus is in its place, if the uterus is in a place where, in a space, in an ecosystem for thriving, then you will be well. And so all of our practices for women's wellness is focused on warming foods, easily digestible foods. It's focused on herbs that are warming, herbs that are slippery, because we have isiwayo as women and folks with uteruses and vaginas. We have what we call isiwayo, which could be translated as vaginal discharge, but really it means her essence.
Oh, that sounds way better. I feel like the traditional language always sounds way better than the modern day versions of them. Yeah, way better.
Yeah. And then the modern day versions are usually named after men too. So
yeah, I know. That's a whole other podcast episode. You'll come back. We'll talk about that. Or everyone could just go watch The Business of Birth Control, because there's a lot of good information about that there too, which you're in. So
yeah.
Yes, you can get more good information. But anyways, go on.
And so this is why we do vaginal steaming, because in Mesoamerica, our uterus is considered to be a pot. Think about like this person has a bun in the oven and the oven's warm, right? But for us, it's a steaming pot. And so in order for our steaming pot or our uterus to be in its conditions that is necessary for balance, then we need to add steam to the pot if we're having symptoms of coldness in the body, if we're having symptoms of stagnation, if we're having symptoms of dropped womb, then we add steam to the pot, and this will help your uterus come back into balance. You give your body the tools to fix itself.
I mean, it's exactly how I think it should be. And I think that when we consider modern medicine or Western medicine, it's just, in my experience with my clients, has just taken themselves out of the healing process and instead replaced it with a generic one-size-fits-all approach, which doesn't really work, as we've clearly seen. It's demonstrated for us every day. And that is, I think that's the fundamental flaw that we're facing right now. And that makes me think about preserving these traditional healing practices. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the current state of ancestral wisdom and traditional medicine? Do you feel like it's really seeing a resurgence, and are people looking to bring these practices back into their lives? Do you feel like people are finally seeing Western medicine? And again, it has its place. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Obviously, I had surgery in September. I get it. Like, I understand all of that. But do you feel like, from your perspective, that this is something is shifting?
For sure. I feel like, especially in the last 10 years, there's been a resurgence. And then again, I feel like with the start of COVID, people went inward and they realized like, my health matters. How I fare day to day matters. And even just cutting out travel, cutting out like socializing, all of these things help you come back to your body. And when you come back to your body, you realize what you actually need. You tap into your desire. And you even are less distracted. So if you are feeling discomfort and pain, you're actually more connected to it. You're like, oh, shoot, yeah, that's right. I can't ignore this. I can't distract myself from this pain or this discomfort or this little thing that has been bothering me. This is your body communicating to you. In Mexican traditional medicine, everything is a communication. Everything is, your body doesn't turn against you. Your body isn't weak. Your body isn't bad. It's a communication so that you know exactly what to do. There is a reaction that your body wants you to have. There's a result that needs to happen when you have these symptoms. And this is why we wrap our womb with the faja or a rebozo. We keep our womb warm. A lot of folks from traditional families, even if it's not Mexican, I've heard folks all around the world say like, Don't go outside with wet hair. Don't step on the floor
Yes.
cold.
I've heard
Cover
all
your
that.
back, right?
Yes. Oh God, I heard all of that growing up. Yes. Oh, that's so
Yes.
funny. Yes. But then
Yes.
it just always feels like that stuff is debunked. And then you, like you said, right, you feel kind of dumb for thinking it or for practicing it.
Hmm. But it really has a function. You think
Yeah.
about what happens in the human body when all of your blood flow is delivered only to your vital organs.
Right.
Like what happens to your ovaries in that situation? What happens to your adrenals in that
Nothing good.
situation? Yeah.
Nothing good.
And then what happens to your hormones if they're delivered by blood in that situation? And what happens if you make a habit out of those things and you're doing it every day? What are the long-term effects? So these tiny little things that are so easy to do, put on socks,
Yep.
are really helping you long term. It's preventative care. It's maybe, you're 9 years old or 12 years old when they tell you this, but it'll pay off when you're 40, 50, 60.
It has a cumulative effect, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can we
Yeah.
go back to the what we were talking about with the uterus or chronic stress dropping your womb? And can you talk a little bit
Mm.
about the mechanism you'd mentioned, the fight, flight, or freeze, and how it
Mm.
impacts the muscle, the muscles of the uterus? I'd love for you to just share more about that because I do find this fascinating, considering that prolapse is such a massive problem,
Oh my
particularly for
gosh,
women who are in their 40s, 50s, and beyond.
for sure. So, two things I want to mention. First, I want to mention like the indigenous breakdown of it. And when we have stress, that's considered susto. Susto is shock, right? If you're in a state of chronic stress, then it's susto described as like your spirit or your consciousness or your essence to be hovering around you instead of in your body where you belong. So you're just kind of like everywhere, you're forgetful, you don't finish things, you lose inspiration in projects. And so this is the state of susto. When your creative energy and your sustainable energy is out of your body, that's womb, that's your womb spirit, that's your womb essence. So it automatically, your womb will drop. We believe that emotional stress, emotional trauma, anything that happens to your emotional body reflects in your physical body and vice versa. And so in in terms of like what happens physiologically, if you are in flight, fight, or freeze mode, your psoas, which is muscle connected from your back, you can actually feel it if you kind of stick your hands on your belly underneath your ribs. But it goes and it attaches from your back and it goes around this way. And when you lift up your leg, let's say for a squat, you're lifting up your knee in that runner's position. I'm about to run. This is when your psoas is activated. It's activated because fight and flight mechanism is for us to get the heck out of here. It's like for us to run away from a jaguar, us to run away from danger, right? There's a physical reaction to emotional stress. Unfortunately, today we could be stuck in traffic late for work and our psoas is being activated for us to run, but we're not running. So this constant activation of the psoas actually causes stress in the uterus. A lot of us don't realize that our muscles are sympathetic to one another. Our muscles, our mucosa, our whole body. There's a reaction in our whole body. When it comes to the viscera, the womb is the think about it as like the pillow that holds up all of the organs. And a lot of us think like it's like a little circle, but actually, the broad ligament, it's called the broad ligament for a reason.
Yeah.
It's huge and it comes around and it's around the pretty much the entire pelvis. It makes up pretty much the whole bottom of your pelvic, not your pelvic floor, but your like that if you think about your viscera as being a bag, like a gut bag. It makes up the bottom of the gut bag. So it's pretty impactful. And so when you're tugging, your muscles react. And if your muscles are always in a state of tension, of activation, then a couple things could happen. So one is they get used to this pulling, tugging, and it moves them out of place. And as it's being moved as your uterus is being moved out of place, there's a stress that happens on all of the surrounding tissue. So there's inflammation, there's retention because there's a fluid exchange in your viscera. There's fluid exchange in your womb that needs to happen around your womb, on your broad ligament. A lot of times when I'm doing sovadas or womb massage, I could feel the broad ligament and these little almost like balls of liquid that go away as you massage because it's just this accumulated fluid.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
incredible. I've had womb massage done before, but I didn't even know anything about these balls of liquid. But yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating.
And so as this becomes tense, your everything tenses up, your ligaments shorten, your tendons shorten. Some of them could even atrophy from the tension. If you're on your cycle, since you have an already stressed out womb, it's going to be even worse when
Mm.
when your womb is contracting. If it's in a bad position, then it's going to be worse and it's going to be painful. You might see brown blood because if the womb is tilted, then the first blood that will come out is going to be the easy blood that's at the entrance. But your blood could pool inside your womb. So if like let's say it's backwards, it's going to pull at the top of the uterus, right? And so
Right.
it's going to be harder for your uterus to contract. It's going to be less efficient. And this is why a lot of us will see brown blood at the start or the end of our periods
Right.
because it's old blood. Fresh blood is pink. Fresh blood is like a crimson color. It's clear. I'm clear as in no clots, right? It's liquid. There's no solids. And so this is like an easy period. And so as this happens, your womb drops and imagine years of chronic stress. Um, Dropped womb is different than a prolapse. A medical prolapse is when your uterus is already in your pelvis and sometimes in your birth canal. It's
All
like
right.
extreme. It's extreme. If I do a Sovada, if I massage someone who has a prolapse, I literally cannot palpate their uterus because it's underneath the pubic bone.
Right.
It's down there. But by then it's really late. It takes so much work to get the uterus back up to where it needs to be, especially because you can't grab onto it, pull it up. A lot of times, because Western doctors are not educated on Salvadas or on manual, visceral manual manipulation, their go-to is surgery. So they
Hysterectomy.
either, yeah,
Or like you were gonna say, I don't know what you were gonna say, but my mom is facing this now potentially. So yes, it's a little
yeah,
frustrating.
yeah. They put meshes, they'll put these rings, or the pessary, the mesh, or the removal. And all of those have long-term effects.
Yeah.
All of those, yeah, all of those are not ideal. The ideal is let's get your womb toned. Let's release your muscles, release your ligaments. Let's release this stress. This is why we do vaginal steaming. This is why we include warmth, right? We want this space to be relaxed. We don't want any tension to create any type of movement in the viscera.
Right.
Mhm.
And
And
so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've been able to um, reverse medical prolapse. Um, one of my clients, she was stage 2 prolapse. She could put her finger in basically like up to here to her vagina before she would feel her cervix. So her cervix was still inside, but it was right there. And
Wow.
it took me a few sessions to get it to where I could actually feel her uterus in her abdomen. Um, but she was able to reverse her prolapse. She no longer needed a pessary or surgery, and she went on to have her third baby.
Oh, wow.
A third baby with no issues. She felt like her prolapse was because she said she felt it prolapse. They were telling her, they were doing directed pushing. They were telling her to push harder at the hospital. She said she felt it drop. And since her second baby, she's like, I want a third baby and I don't want surgery. And this pessary hurts me. And I was like, wow, she didn't seem like the type of person who would want to do traditional healing. And she was just like, okay, like this is my only option. If I don't want surgery, if I don't want this device and I want another child, then there has to be something else. There has to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that sort of leads into my other question, but before I get to that, I wanted to ask you about the wraps. So you mentioned in the postpartum time, wrapping your uterus or your abdomen, your uterus. um, is that something that women can do regardless of whether they've been pregnant or not? Like, do women do it anytime, or is it specifically in the postpartum time?
No, you can do it anytime.
Because I'm into
My,
that. I'm
yes.
feeling it.
My 83-year-old grandmother said that her grandmother died when she was 15. Her grandmother raised her because she was an orphan. Um, Her mother died actually postpartum.
Oh,
And yeah, it's really wild. And so my grandmother said that every day she would tie her grandmother would tie her faja. My grandmother was a well-respected healer, and she was really good at using the rebozo for healing. And she specialized in postpartum care. And so she said that she was bathed by her grandmother every single day. She was like, oh, I was so spoiled. I was an orphan, so I was treated so well. She said, I never felt like an orphan. I always felt so loved. And so she would bathe her every day, literally till she was 15, massage her every day with a special oil. It's a food-based oil, pan de puerco. It's an oil with animal fat and herbs. And so she'd massage her with the animal fat and the herbs. And then she would put she would make basically like a tincture with flowers and put it on her mollera, on her head here at the top. Some folks call this what is it? The pituitary or
oh, the
the
pituitary.
pineal gland.
Oh, the
Some folks
pineal.
call it
Yes, yes.
the
Oh,
pineal
yes.
gland. For us, it's like the mollera. Um, and then she would wrap her in a red faja, and red represents the ancestors, red represents protection. So she's wrapping her in ancestral love every single day. And literally from the time she was a child till she was 15. Um, and so this is lifelong wellness. This is lifelong tools for being healthy and sexual health. And um, it's especially urgent postpartum. It's especially urgent if you have open hips, if you have a dropped womb, if you're having symptoms, then this is the thing to do.
Right. Okay. We'll talk more about that. I feel like
Yeah.
it's so interesting. I mean, if someone wants to do something like this, do they need to book a session with you, or is this common information that's out there how you
Yeah.
do something like this?
If you go to my YouTube channel at Indigemama, I have a free tutorial on how to wrap a faja.
Oh, amazing.
And yeah, and basically I also have a master class, but I think now it's only available if you join my postpartum course. I have a course on Mexican traditional medicine for postpartum. It's really important for me to feel like I'm training the next generation, just like the way I was trained. And so I train birth workers how to do what I do so that my work could expand and help and heal communities that I would never otherwise never get to touch.
Yeah.
I asked my grandmother if I could share this information, and she said, Mija, tienes que, like, my daughter, you have to.
That is just so great. And it's exactly this, is that I'm just thinking about the future of this work and what you see as the future for ancestral healing and traditional healing
Mhm.
practices. Like, where do you feel like this is going?
Yeah. I want to see ancestral healing alive in every community.
Yeah.
I want to see practitioners on every block. In my neighborhood, I'm seeing it like folks will come to me like, hey, I feel like they'll just end up at my door. They end up at my door. They know me as a community herbalist, a community healer. Um, and I want that for every community. Every community deserves that. I have friends who are doulas and birth workers who come to my healing herbal garden and they'll pick fresh herbs for their clients, and their friends and their families to help heal them. And I want to see this expand. I want to see not only like people's houses, giving away herbs and medicine, but community centers and wellness centers and spaces for us to have our ceremonies. There are very little spaces, there are very few spaces that really cater to our health and wellness needs. There are spaces. There's the Eastside Cafe Eco Space. There's community gardens. There's a couple spots in East LA that I know of that are cultural centers. Um, but we need more. It's still not enough. And I want it to be enough. I want it to be abundant. I want to continue the work of my grandmother Josefita, my great great grandmother, my tatarabuela Josefita, who my grandmother said that she was so generous with her healing and with her resources that they brought 50 buses to her funeral, and they shut down the mercado, the market in Mexico City, because all the vendors knew her. She had a shop, like a bread shop also, where she sold bread. And so everybody, like, it was just like the town was shut down, for like to say goodbye to her. And I imagine all that love, all the people that she helped, all the people that she healed. Imagine if there was a Josefita on every street. One of the things that I really want to happen is, well, I'm writing a book on postpartum healing right now.
Oh, amazing. I
And
can't wait to share
yeah,
about it. That's so awesome.
yeah. I want our medicine delivered to the everyday person. And I want to reawaken folks' memories. I had a student, right now I'm getting ready to open doors for Matriz Concha. It's my lifelong self-womb wellness course. It's all about indigenous womb wellness practices. And one of my students, one of our activities is to have a tepache challenge. Tepache is an ancient fermented drink made of pineapple. And so she's learning, she's doing it, and we're all here at the challenge. We're finally going to taste our finished product together. We had like a little party, and she tasted it and she just started crying. And she said, oh my God, I remember my grandmother used to make this. I had no memory of it. No one in my family learned how to do it, but I distinctly remember drinking this and that she would keep it in a little tub underneath her kitchen sink.
Ah, wow. The taste of something brings back a memory from what, decades ago.
Yeah, and this
Yeah,
is what I
it's
want
profound.
for all of us to have these memories awakened in our bodies and for us to have the tools to bring back what is necessary for our wellness.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. And I just really appreciate all of your knowledge and the wisdom you've
Hmm.
brought to this interview today. And I would love for you to just tell anyone who's listening where they can find you. I also, when we stop recording, I'll talk to you about your practitioner training or your training program, because I would
Awesome.
love to share about that too, because I just feel like
Awesome.
obviously there's just so much need for this.
Yeah, for sure. You could find me across platforms at Indigemama, everywhere, Indigemama. And you could find me online, indigemama.com. Right now, I'm inviting folks to a free womb care challenge. And you could access that at indigemama.com/WC.
WC, perfect.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. If not, just
If
find
you
me on Instagram.
there you go. Exactly. It's where we all are. If you're over like 25.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's
Well,
WCC.
okay.
Indigemama.com/WCC. Womb Care Challenge. Yeah, WCC.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you again so much for this. I have just loved listening to everything you had to share. I can't wait to continue learning more. And I'm so excited to share this episode with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That's a wrap. Be sure to click that subscribe button to join me for more Girl Talk Gone Menstrual in upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, check out my latest period party episode. And if you're looking for a deeper dive into your hormones, go ahead and take my period quiz at NicoleJardim.com/quiz.